Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are here speaking directly from Brazil, speaking in Portuguese, our mother tongue. I would like to thank everyone who is here with us and following our conference. We are from Rio Ethical Fashion doing the curatorship of this panel. We are an international forum of sustainable fashion based in Rio de Janeiro, and we're going to bring important themes to us which are fibers of fashion and the relationship with the land territories. This panel will share different views from different agroecological communities located in the northeast of Brazil, the community of Tapeba, and the rural workers of Choró and central Ceará, and how to practice collectivity, solidarity, economy, and forms of exchange and sharing. We will have 5 speakers and a documentary film created by ESPLAR, an NGO that supplies organic cotton to VEJA Fair Trade, a French sneaker brand produced and purchased in Brazil, to this conference. The film has 20 minutes and it's called How Much is a Life Worth, which is also the name of our panel, bringing testimonials from indigenous leaders and rural workers, and that maps out the ecological and social debts that the Brazilian state has with these two people. Each of them will bring a different approach on how textiles can be produced in a more sustainable way, considering people and the planet. I will start by introducing myself. I am Yame Hayes, the moderator of the panel. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Rio Ethical Fashion. I have a master's degree in political sociology and the author of the book, The Cotton Agribusiness, Environment, and Sustainability, launched last year. I would like each one to introduce themselves. Professor Lillian, please.
Ah, eu
Lillian,
sou.
you can
Olá,
go ahead.
sim, eu sou a professora Lívia.
Hello, my name is
Hello,
Professor Lillian Guimarães Berlin.
eu sou pesquisadora da
I am
área
a
de
researcher
sustentabilidade
in
na
the
moda.
area of sustainability and
Tenho alguns
fashion.
livros escritos
I
sobre
have a few books written
sustentabilidade e moda, né,
about
lançados no
sustainability
Brasil,
and fashion
políticas
launched in
periféricas
Brazil.
como design
I
responsável,
research
e me
peripheral
debruço sobre
policies like
sistemas nessa
sustainable
área de
design
educação
and systems
e
in the area of
dentro de
education.
projetos onde eu sou voluntária,
I
onde
work in
realmente
projects where I
acredito
volunteer,
que a
and I
mudança é
really
possível.
believe in the change in fashion. Thank you, Lillian. Marina Colorado, please. Hello, EMA and everyone who is watching. Good evening and good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Marina Colorado. I am the founder of the Modifica Institute, an independent organization of journalism with in research and education. I work researching the productive chain of fashion, especially the impacts on the life of certain people, specifically women, spread out throughout Brazil, especially on the textile production chain. I have a master's degree in social sciences researching feminism and agroecology. Agroecology is one of our main agendas in the Modifica Institute. Thank you, Marina. Magnolia Said, please. Magnolia, your microphone is muted. Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you, Yame, for the invitation. My name is Magnolia Said. I am a lawyer and popular educator. Currently, I work in ESPLAR, and I am coordinating a project with a partner called Abelco with the indigenous peoples. I have written about violence against women, which is my preferred topic, and also about the financial institutions. I have written about this throughout many years. And that's it. Thank you, Magnolia. And I am also a screenwriter in the documentary film. Magnolia is here. It has been a pleasure for us to invite her here because she was one of the screenwriters in the documentary film that we are about to watch. And Baby Tapeba is one of the stars in the film that we are going to watch. Baby, please.
Veiga Tapeba, Sanamaitá. Eu inicio essa fala
I
primeiro.
would like to start this speech by introducing myself in our ancestral language, Ingatu. I am Vebe Tapeba. I am an indigenous leader of our country. I currently coordinate the Federation of the Peoples and Indigenous Tribes of Ceará. I work in the office in B, which is the first lawyer office, indigenous lawyer office. I am a city representative in the municipality of Caucaia in the state of Ceará. I'm speaking from Brasilia because we are having some appointments here in Brasilia, but I'm in Ceará. I belong to the Tapeba territory, one of the most symbolic indigenous lands in the country. We are also portrayed in this book and in this documentary film, showing our struggle in the state for the defense of our territory. Thank you, everyone. Once we have introduced ourselves, I would like to start this conversation speaking about cotton, which is a very important part of our fashion sector. It was part of the first pre-capitalist global chain. Since Brazil was a part of a colony of Portugal, it was part of the global chain. The USA, Egypt, and India were also part of the chain through the monoculture of cotton. And it was essential for the creation of the capital accumulation during the Industrial Revolution. It's very important to talk about this process because we're going to see a lot of similarities in the culture of cotton in Brazil since centuries ago. Since Brazil was a colony of Portugal, we have planted cotton with the extensive use of slave workforce in the past and very little technology. Family farmers planted cotton. In the 70s, this occupation started in the Cerrado, which is a savanna-like biome with extremely diverse flora and fauna. We have a continentally big country. If you don't know Brazil in detail, it's very important to understand what we are talking about. This is the map of Brazil, and these are the main biomes, where you can see the shade in yellow. This is where Magnolia and Baby come from. The Amazon is the most famous part of Brazil, which is the darker green. It occupies most of our territory. And the orange part is what we consider the Cerrado, the biome that I'm going to describe here. It is the most biodiverse savanna in the planet. Very few people know this, but it is a very rich and important biome. We talk about the Amazon a lot, but the Cerrado has a vital importance for Brazil and for the planet. And starting in the 70s, when the military government started in Brazil, the Cerrado was occupied intensively by the agribusiness. And until today, we have lost 50% of this biome. Basically, what we had here was an occupation of this territory due to fiscal incentives for the agriculture producers. And what we have today are huge patches of land which are planting soy and pasture for cattle. This damages biodiversity. planting soy and cattle for agribusiness uses a lot of pesticides. Brazil is the second largest producers of cotton after the United States. So the volume that we export of cotton is huge, and Brazil is number one in sustainable cotton. This is what I try to write in the book. Why this cotton is called sustainable, and why is it sold this way? Why it crosses international borders with this attribute of sustainability if it has this origin of destroying biomes and occupying native lands. Starting in the 1970s, Brazil starts being the biggest consumer of pesticides. Since 2019, Brazil is considered this way. Soy and corn are planted together with cotton. We're talking about the same producers. Soy is a very famous commodity in Europe due to the impacts that it has. A lot of people know that soy uses a lot of pesticides. A lot of people know that soy is used for the consumption of animals. It's not used for humans. It's not used for food security. Pesticides are extremely harmful. It causes cancer. There's a lot of research on it. Glyphosate is forbidden in Europe, but it's very much sold in Brazil. Chemical inputs may represent between 35 to 40% of the final cost of cotton, and that is very important. It means that we are paying less, half of the price of cotton in pesticides. It is very severe. Half of the price of cotton is the price of pesticides. As I said, this industry receives a lot of tax exemptions. It survives off of tax exemptions, and we pay twice. We pay for pesticides when we buy cotton, and we pay through taxes. So these are two interdependent industries, the chemical industries and agribusiness, and it develops the exclusion of the farm workers because they lose their lands, and the farm workers lose their jobs because of advanced technologies and machinery. It goes without saying that the most affected by the use of pesticides in the fields are the workers, are the ones that manipulate this poison. There are a lot of studies on the impacts of pesticides in the water, which affects everyone that is in the surroundings of this region, the region of the intensive use of pesticides. These are very alarming data, which made Rio Ethical Fashion Institute Modifica to join last year and create a petition last year called Fashion Without Poison. We gathered 50,000 signatures. We took them to Brasilia, and we gathered the campaigns that already existed against pesticides. It's important to say that those producers of soy and cotton have a very strong political representation in the Congress through the ruralist front, and the same front is the front that votes against the outlining of indigenous lands. They vote in favor of the use of pesticides. So it has been a very harmful front of representatives for the small farmers. We have the system of monoculture, which is a perverse extraction mode without any social benefit. This practice of pesticide use brings a huge imbalance for biodiversity and preservation of the land, for the retention of carbon. It has a huge impact also on climate emergency. Soy also is linked to the deforestation chain in Brazil. If you remember the map of Brazil, Cerrado is very close to the Amazon. What we see today is a process of deforestation of the Amazon that starts in Cerrado. So this practice that happens in Cerrado is already migrating to the Amazon with a lot of points of deforestation. So soy and pastures are migrating to the Amazon. We don't have much time to stop this deforestation in the Amazon, which already happened in Cerrado. We are seeing a neo-colonial system based on this exploration through the commodities, which potentializes this regime, this international regime of labor division that fixates the global south countries as extractors of nature. We need to change this asymmetrical geography. It is very important that the global south is seen as a place where people live, people who are impacted. We know that the indigenous communities are the guardians of our forest, and if we don't take care of the lives of these cities, people who live in those places, we are going to have a process of devastation as well. And to finish, since we are talking about fashion, we cannot forget that our sector has to be aware of all of these issues. Sustainable cotton, with all of those issues that we are mentioning, cannot be considered sustainable because it does not care for people, it does not care for the environment. So the fashion and the brands have to pay attention to those certifications, to those seals, to those marketing speeches by the companies. We know that greenwashing, not only in Brazil, but in the whole world, has been a big threat to the advancement of sustainability. This is how I conclude my speech. Thank you very much. And I'll pass the floor to Marina Colorato so that she can have her 15 minutes. Marina, the floor is yours. I think I'll use a little bit less, Yame, because you already gave us a amazing presentation. In the cultural framework, we also have an ideology of agribusiness that is disseminated nationally by an important TV channel in the country. We have this ideology in schools and in the universities. We have an agro culture, and this culture is strengthened through um, through a combination with music. The sertanejo music is very connected to the agribusiness to make people understand that agro is a good thing. In this sense, what we understand, and that is why we created the campaign Fashion Without Poison, is that we have to strengthen a counter narrative. We have to foster how much there are alternatives in Brazil already, how much we have agroecological communities planting real sustainable models and resisting this advancement of agribusiness in the territories. Fibers of Care is a project derived from a dialogue that came from a previous report called Fashion Threads. We created a vast analysis of life cycle, a social and environmental analysis to understand fibers in Brazil, and thinking about a circular economy for the global south. We need to talk about other types of production in the country. The agroecological cotton appeared as a possible alternative. It already exists, both from the social standpoint. We'll have Magnolia and Baby talking about this in a few minutes, and also due to the carbon retention. This helps a lot when we talk about the mitigation of the climate damage. We either change the agricultural model or we're not going to have the decrease in greenhouse gases. Fibers of Care is a project that thinks about shedding a light on this Brazil that is producing alternative textile fibers. I don't like the word alternatives very much, but we just have to differentiate what is mainstream from what is different so that the big fashion chain can see this possibility of strengthening these new processes and these processes that are already existing and that are not so known. We need to expand these alternative forms of production and we need to face this practice of agribusiness. Fibers of Care mixes journalism and the academia in a dialogue with the several different actors of this production chain. We have the producers, we have the buyers and like the small and the medium sized brands. We are trying to facilitate the relationship of these different actors and systematize this knowledge so that more people can have access to it. This is one of the proposals of the Institute Modifica. This knowledge already exists. This knowledge is in books, in the territories, in the people that try to create different ways of producing the fibers. We're trying to bring all this knowledge to the same place so that more people can have access to it. We're trying to shed a light on this movement. This resistance movement never ceased to exist. So we're trying to approximate the city and the country. We are very distant when we talk about the fashion industry. We always think about the big cities, but the fibers start in the country. Fibers of Care is an attempt to join all of the people involved in agroecological production, not only to refrain the advancements, but to get better public policies and to raise the awareness of the society on the production in the country. And fashion is a thread that can connect people from the country to the city to talk about all of this and to show how this network that is all of full of problems and impacts and negative impacts can be a network for transformation. At the end, we end up connecting ourselves and taking this to more and more people so that we can be able to face this culture of agribusiness in practice, in ideology, in the dialogues and conversations that we have on our daily basis. We know that when this is disseminated in a big TV channel, this reaches the whole population. There are people that defend agribusiness. They don't know how to think. They don't know that there are other alternatives. So that we bring the fashion closer to this dialogue, we can open a conversation with more people that are interested by the topic because this has to do with the climate, it has to do with our health and the life conditions on Earth. We see that it has become more and more complex to live on Earth. In my final considerations, I'm here with everyone to think about how we can take this agroecological ideology ahead and how cotton that is not sustainable can travel through the global production chain easier, and how it can gain credibility. The transformation is not coming, the transformation is already there. We need a different model to get out of where we are right now. And agroecology in countries like Brazil is possible. When we take agroecology to an industry that is powerful like fashion, we can gain momentum. There's very little time for us to chase after the problems that have happened, but fashion is strong enough for us to do that. This is a little bit of my project. And now Lilian and Magnolia can speak about what they have done in practice.
Você está mutada, Yami.
Yambe, your phone is muted. Marina, can you talk to us a little bit about what fibers you are researching besides cotton? You're talking about alternative fibers, so can you talk about which fibers? We are researching agroecological cotton. We are also looking at silk, the silk that we have here in Brazil. We understand that hemp is allowed in Brazil. Here in Brazil is forbidden to produce hemp, but we are also struggling towards the legalization of hemp production in Brazil. We have banana fibers in a smaller scale, but there are fibers that can be produced in larger scale. In the case of hemp, there's a big capturing of carbon. They are not only alternatives in this environmental standpoint, but from the standpoint of how production works. Legalization of hemp consumes less pesticides, but we have to think about different mode of production because it's not the same mode of production as cotton. This has to be dialectical. We need to think about sustainability, but also other modes of production. Perfect, Marina. Thank you very much for the compliment. And now I think it's clear about the possibilities that we may have for facing this monopoly of cotton that actually excluded these other alternatives. We used to have linen in Brazil. Linen has a lot to do with our climate. It is very breathable for our temperature. And this monopoly of the commodity of cotton actually destroy all the other possibilities. This work of fibers of care is very important, Marina. Thank you very much for shedding a light on other alternative fibers. Above all, it's an honor to be here. This conference celebrates life above all. When we think about pathways of care, Marina talked about care in her report. She talked also about solidarity. Deep down, I think we are celebrating life. The big solidarity of all of us is the solidarity towards life, toward humans, animals, the rivers, the forests. It's very nice for us to be here and to be together with this amazing project. The project by Magnolia is also amazing. The initiatives by Modifica and Rio Ethical Fashion. I think all of our speeches converge. We're talking about the global south.
de dimensões
We're
continentais
talking about a continental dimension
e que guarda
with an exuberant nature,
ainda com
and we still have our
culturas
original peoples
e
with
é muito
several
importante,
cultures and several languages.
desenvolvida em todos os
It's
aspectos,
important
tanto
that this
socioambiental
speech
como
is heard with all
econômico, né?
aspects,
Primeiro
social,
ponto,
environmental, and economic aspects.
infelizmente, né, como a Yami bem trouxe,
Unfortunately, as
algumas
Yames said,
práticas
there are
predatórias,
some
desumanas
predatory
no
and
nosso país,
inhuman
que
practices
já
in our
são
country
centenárias, mas que
that are
aconteceram
centennial,
muito da metade do século XX para cá, assim, de uma
and
forma
they
muito
have
forte.
worsened very
Elas
much
encontraram no
from
nosso país
the middle of the
como
20th century until now.
propícias, né,
And
para
they
se
found in our
sistematizarem.
country
Na realidade
favorable
do
conditions
contexto, né,
to be
quando a gente vai falar do nosso
systematized.
contexto global, essas práticas são
These
assim cruéis.
practices are
E
cruel.
eu sou da área, né, sou de universidade, sou da academia,
I am from
trabalho
the
com conhecimento,
academia.
com a
I deal
difusão
with
de informação.
knowledge and the dissemination of
E a
information.
minha, assim, o meu propósito realmente é tocar
And my
consciências,
purpose
né, para que
is
as
to raise
pessoas
the awareness
acordem,
so that
né, para
people
que
can
essas
wake up,
práticas, né, acordem para o fato de que elas não estão lá
so
fora.
that they
Elas estão
can see
também lá
that
fora,
these
mas elas
practices are
estão
not
nas
out
nossas
there.
cidades,
They're
né, nas
here
nossas
in our
periferias,
cities,
estão
in
nos lugares onde
our
a gente vai passear, estão
outskirts.
por
They
todo
are
lugar.
in the places
Nós
where
aqui no
we
Sudeste
travel. They are
e
all over Brazil.
na
They're
maioria
not
das
far
nossas
away. They're
universidades, nós aqui temos
here in our
encontrado
daily
regiões
life.
altamente exploradas pela
We get
indústria
to
da
know
moda no
people that are
Brasil
highly
e,
explored
por um outro
by
lado,
the
também,
industry
né,
of
que a
fashion in
Marina trouxe
Brazil.
toda uma cultura de
And on the
privilegiar
other hand, as Marina
o
said, we
agronegócio, né, o
have a culture
agropecuário,
of
a
privileging
moda
the
digital,
agribusiness.
e você fica assim meio, meu Deus, eu preciso acordar as pessoas, né,
We
tocar nessas
see
necessidades,
agroecological
porque
culture in TikTok, for example, and
toda a
then
proposta
people
dessa
start
conferência,
seeing
né,
that they
sobre
have to
o
wake
caminho
up.
do cuidado e a solidariedade, são pontos assim extremamente importantes,
Solidarity and the pathways
porque
of care are extremely
definitivamente
important because
a
after
maior parte, uma
2020,
grande parcela da sociedade brasileira
most of the
vive
Brazilian
numa situação
society
de extrema necessidade.
lives
Eu não vou trazer
in
todos os
a
dados que a gente
situation
não
of
tem nem bastante
extreme need.
controle aqui,
I'm not going to bring
mas
data
a gente
because I
vive
don't
num
want to
momento muito
ruin the mood,
caótico.
but because
E a
but
grande
we live
proporção,
in a very
né,
chaotic moment.
da nossa
And
sociedade,
most of our
ela é
society
composta por pessoas negras,
is made up of
pobres,
black,
geralmente
poor
núcleos amparados
people,
por mulheres,
usually
né?
families that
Nós
are
temos os povos
supported
originários
by
passando
women.
por um momento
We
assim de
have
extrema
indigenous people
maldade,
that are
né?
going
Extrema
through
maldade.
moments of
Eles estão
extreme
sendo ameaçados,
cruelty.
né? São
They're
muito
being
resilientes
decimated. They're very
e a
resilient,
gente
but they
passa
have
por uma
been going through this
opressão
for many years.
simbólica,
And we're going
cultural,
through an oppression when it comes to the
de
culture of fashion
descodificação muito veemente, muito forte. Quando
that
eu
is very
penso
clear.
nessas pessoas,
When I think
são
about these
aquelas que se
people,
relacionam com a moda de forma direta ou
those that
indiretamente
are
humana,
related to fashion directly or indirectly,
dificilmente elas
those that
se
survive
relacionam,
off
elas
of,
se
of
relacionam com os
fashion,
significados que a roupa tem,
those that wear clothes
infelizmente,
and relate to
comunicam.
clothes
Como é que a
and all
gente
the meanings
faz?
that clothes
Como é que a
have,
gente se comunica? Como é que a gente
how we
chega? Como é que os
communicate,
projetos chegam?
how the
E foi,
projects
na verdade,
happen. I'm sorry, the speaker is muted.
Lilia, você mutou o seu som.
Lilium, you are muted.
desculpa, foi sem querer.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Pensando exatamente nessa imensa
Thinking
parcela da população
exactly about this
que
portion of the
eu
population,
trago para vocês, né, e trago aqui
I bring to you
uma reflexão que eu
a
acho que tem muito a ver
reflection
com o
that I
trabalho,
think
especialmente da Magnólia,
that has a lot to do
que é
with the
como
work
a
by
gente
Magnolia,
pode, ao invés de falar em triple bottom line,
which
ao invés de
is
falar em pilares
instead of talking
sociais,
about
pilar
triple bottom
social e
line,
econômico da
social
sustentabilidade,
pillar,
como é que a
economic
gente
pillar of
pode reverter isso em
sustainability,
valores,
how can we
sendo
reverse that
o
into
pilar social
values?
revertido pelo valor do bom, o pilar
The
econômico pelo
value
valor
of
justo
good,
e o pilar
the value
ambiental
of
pelo valor do
just,
limpo.
the value of
O
clean.
bom, o justo e o limpo são valores
The good,
universais,
the
né?
just, and the
E
clean
várias
are
pessoas que
universal
estão nos ouvindo
values.
agora,
Many
talvez
people
elas
that
não
are listening
conheçam
to us
muito
now when I talk
através da sua
about clean,
fonte, né?
this person can
Não tem nada a ver com a
converge
minha, com a da
their
Yami, com a da
perception
Baby.
with
Então,
mine,
isso é um
with
valor
Lily, with the Marinas, with
pessoal, assim como
Babies.
eles têm um
Clean
trabalho
is a universal value,
ao que é injusto
and it is
comum. Isso faz
supposed
muito com a
with
sustentabilidade.
is supposed
Então,
to
quando eu penso
dirty
nesses
or
valores, né, e a
unfair
gente muda um
or
pouco o jeito de
bad.
falar e de
If we
entender,
change our
a
way
gente
of speaking and
refletir sobre a
understanding and we start
sustentabilidade, ela se
reflecting
baseia
upon
justamente em valores,
sustainability, which is based
valores
on
enraizados na
values
nossa consciência,
that
e
are in
como a
our
gente toca eles,
consciousness
né?
and how we
Muitas vezes
can touch
você
upon them.
interpreta esses valores, fica
When
muito
you
mais fácil para a
interpret those
gente entender o que
values,
é
it's a
economia
lot easier
circular.
to understand
Fica
what
muito
is
fácil de entender o que
solidarity
é a economia
economy,
circular.
what is
Fica mais
circular
fácil de você
economy. It
entender
is
o
easier
que
to
é economia
understand
colaborativa,
what is
né?
collaborative
Cooperativismo.
economy or
E
cooperative
aí eu
economy.
olho para o trabalho
And then I look at the
belíssimo
work, the
trabalho que a
beautiful
ESPLAR
work
vem fazendo por todos
that
esses anos,
ESPLAR has
né?
done throughout
Inclusive,
all these years.
tem
And I
um trabalho
see,
que vocês vão ver, né? A audiência vai ver na
and
sequência,
the audience is going to see the
quanto esse
documentary
trabalho
film up
ele
next.
amplia o
And I see
conhecimento,
how much this work
amplifia o
expands knowledge.
conhecimento
When you
o tempo
expand
todo,
knowledge,
né?
you
Quando
expand
você
your
restaura as
awareness.
relações de
When you
confiança, né?
reinforce
Você amplia
relationships of
a
trust,
capacidade de
you
cooperação,
expand the capacity of
né?
cooperation
Quando
and
você
sharing.
reconecta
When you
pessoas às
reconnect
suas histórias, à sua cultura, você
people to their
legitima
culture and their
então, esse trabalho
inheritance,
baseado,
you
né, nos
legitimize
valores,
your work.
porque
So
claramente,
the work
né,
based
os
on
trabalhos da questão
values
ecológica, do agro,
that I see
do
clearly on
agroecological, da magnólia, do ESPLAR, do
agroecological
VEJA, do
cotton
artesanato,
and
né,
ESPLAR and
que está no
handicraft and
nosso
the Tapeba
trabalho,
people, I
tira esses indivíduos da
see
noção
the
de
work that
dependência e
takes away
transforma
individuals from this
dessas
relationship of
práticas
dependence
sistematizadas pelo nosso
and
país,
the systematized practices of our
colocam
country
numa noção
and
de
puts this individual
independência,
in a notion of
né, de resiliência
interdependence
entre pessoas, entre o
among people,
coletivo
among
e dentro da própria
collectives,
natureza,
and
que não
within
existe
nature
separar essas duas,
itself
né?
that has been
Então,
separated from
esse
us.
pulo entre a dependência e a
So this
interdependência,
leap
ela só pode ser feita
from
aumentando
dependence
as
to
relações
interdependence can
através dos
only be
valores.
taken
Então, talvez
through the
a gente tenha
values.
sempre que pensar, né,
So
em
maybe we
pessoas
have
que
to
a
think
gente
about what
escolhe
is
para
good, what
falar,
is just, and
para
what is
agir,
clean
desde
before we
das minhas
act.
aulas em universidades particulares até os trabalhos
When I
mais
worked in
mais
private
voltados para as
universities
populações
and when I worked with
é a
rural
mesma, é a
communities,
mesma linguagem,
I
porque se você
always use the
tocar num
same
lugar
language
que está um pouco fora do
because it
racional,
is going to
você
touch
vai ter
upon a
uma
place that is
abertura para
not
que realmente
conscious
entenda os
conscious for us,
princípios, né,
so
das
that you
novas
can
economias
really
e que
understand all
você
those
se esforçar
principles
para
of the new
levar elas
economies and the whole
para essa grande
issue
parcela
of
da população,
sustainability.
parece um assunto extremamente distante.
For this
Ainda
big
mais que
portion of
quando
the
você
population,
fala
sustainability
sobre
seemed
assuntos em
a
inglês,
very
né, que usam
distant
termos da academia, e
term.
muitas vezes essas pessoas não entendem, não
The
sabem o que
academia
falar.
always used terms in English or very technical
Isso é
terms, but if you
muito
use
difícil de
values, if you
entender.
talk about what is just, what
Então,
is clean, and what is good, it's a
a
lot
minha fala
easier to
não é uma
understand.
fala muito longa,
My speech is
né?
not a very
Até
long
esqueci o
speech.
cronômetro aqui, já se perdeu no meu celular.
I put a
Mas
time watch
você
here on my phone, but I
percebe, né, no
already
trabalho do
lost
VEJA,
track
no
of
trabalho da
time.
Magnólia,
I observe
a
looking at the
capacidade de
work by
você
Magnolia and the work
refletir,
by Vebe and your work,
duas
Yame and
coisas,
Marina.
né,
I can
que
see
nós estamos precisando muito, que são os
that your
valores.
work gives value
Falar em
to what we need.
sustentabilidade, né, num
Talking
país
about
global,
sustainability
né,
in
num
a
país
global south
produtor,
country,
num país
in
que
a
está assolado por uma
production
exploração
country
predatória e desumana,
that
né,
is
dos meios de
plagued
produção,
by an
dos povos
inhuman
indígenas,
and cruel
né,
means of
é
production,
sair de um lugar comum.
is
Essa
leaving a
é a
common
grande
ground.
resistência, né, que nós representamos aqui. A gente está saindo do lugar
We
comum,
are
né,
leaving
trazendo de volta um lugar que sempre
this
existiu
common ground and
a
bringing
todos
back a place that always belonged to all of the
a todos
original
nós, na
peoples of
verdade.
this country, all
Então,
of us,
é
actually.
uma honra, né,
It
poder
is an
estar
honor for
aqui
me to be
dentro de uma
here
estrutura que está se falando
within
de
a structure where
solidariedade
we're talking
e
about
que vai
solidarity
levar,
and being able to take our speech, our vision based on values. I would like the audience, when they watch the documentary film by Magnolia, where we have amazing speeches by VEJA, try to listen to it thinking about what is good, what is just, and what is clean. And I hope there are many other projects so that people can leave this anesthetized place and wake up. Magnolia, the floor is yours.
Obrigada, Lilian.
Thank you, Lillian.
Muito inspiradora.
Very inspiring speech to bring the documentary film before Magnolia's comments, because I think it's important to have the film first, and then Magnolia can comment on the film and on how the film was designed and made. I would ask Luciano now to play the film for us.
A minha vida, ela não tem preço, ela vale muito, minha vida importa muito. Eu não sei para o Estado brasileiro, porque a gente não sabe o que estão fazendo, né, com as vidas que se foram, que estão indo. Vivemos num país que as vidas parece que não tem um mínimo valor.
Eu acredito que a minha vida para o Estado brasileiro não vale muito não, porque se de fato valesse, o Estado ele poderia muito bem proteger mais a minha vida, poderia proteger mais a vida da minha comunidade e do meu povo. Pelo contrário, o Estado ele age para que as nossas vidas fiquem cada vez mais expostas, cada vez mais vulneráveis. Um Estado que não regulariza o nosso território, e aí essa não regularização nos deixa numa situação de vulnerabilidade, de risco, pela luta que nós fazemos pelo nosso território.
Então, assim, se a gente olhar a doença que tem no mundo hoje, causada pelo agrotóxico comprovadamente, e esse povo que estão no poder não reconhece, é muito grande. Então isso gera um dano muito grande. A gente observa que na nossa comunidade, tempos atrás, tinha muita doença, e hoje a nossa comunidade é uma das que usa menos veneno, e a gente percebe que de anos atrás para cá, o número de doenças caiu muito mesmo. E a gente sabe que era causado pelo agrotóxico, a gente sabe que é verdade. E a gente era usuário de veneno, a gente não vai mentir dizer que não era, nós era muito usuário de veneno, que é uma das comunidades que talvez tenha mais usado veneno no mundo. Só que quando eles vieram, o ESPLAR veio, já trazia uma alternativa da gente sair dos agrotóxicos e trabalhar com a agroecologia. Então a gente experimentou, tanto que quando a gente iniciou, a gente nem trabalhava em toda a área, a gente não, tirou uma área para ver se de fato é verdade, se isso dá certo, se não dá. E deu certo, e hoje, graças a Deus, a gente trabalha em toda a área nossa ela é trabalhada agroecologicamente, sem uso de veneno, sem uso de queimadas. Isso comprovadamente.
E o Estado brasileiro ele tem sido negligente e omisso nessa questão envolvendo a regularização do nosso território, especialmente. Também tem sido omisso e negligente na implementação de políticas públicas que garantam maior dignidade para o nosso povo. Então a dívida histórica que o Estado tem com os nossos povos são certamente ligadas principalmente à questão do nosso território e das condições de subsistência dos nossos povos dentro desse território. Então a dívida ela é histórica, a dívida ela está longe de ser paga.
Se a gente levar pelo trabalho que a gente desenvolve aqui há 17 anos, trabalhando dentro dos conformes ambientais, a gente nunca foi reconhecido, nunca foi valorizado por esse lado. A gente trabalha em preservação da vida de todo ser humano, tanto da criação animal como de todos os seres humanos. A gente trabalha em preservação das vidas e o Estado não valoriza essa questão. Nunca fomos vistos, nunca fomos reconhecidos por esse lado aí. Eu acho que a ausência do Estado é exatamente não ter técnico para fazer as capacitações, formar as famílias, trazer alternativa, porque existe alternativa, né? Existe alternativa. E era uma coisa simples do Estado fazer. Nem precisava tanto dinheiro, mas trazer técnico para fazer capacitações com as famílias, formar as famílias, mostrar para as famílias, assim como o ESPLAR fez, trouxe a forma exata de a gente saber que a gente tinha que sair dali dos agrotóxicos e sair e dar certo, né?
Em 92, o povo Tapeba ele realizou a sua primeira retomada de parte do seu território. Essa retomada ela exatamente é no lugar que nós estamos aqui na Lagoa do Tapeba, que por trás nós temos a escola de Tapeba, temos a própria lagoa que nós éramos proibidos de entrar, terreiro sagrado de Pau Branco, área de plantio, casa de farinha, áreas de moradia, matas. Então representou muito para nós, ainda tem uma importância muito simbólica e política, a primeira retomada que o povo Tapeba realizou lá no ano de 1992. Nós já estamos num quarto estudo, quarto processo de demarcação do nosso território. O primeiro processo de demarcação ele foi arquivado pela FUNAI, os argumentos eram totalmente sem sustentação. Os últimos 2 processos foram anulados por decisões judiciais lá no Superior Tribunal de Justiça. E o atual processo de demarcação ele encontra-se numa fase bem avançada, com portaria declaratória expedida pelo Ministério da Justiça, mas que por conta de uma decisão política do governo federal, do governo Bolsonaro, houve uma decisão de paralisação em todos os processos de demarcação de terras indígenas no Brasil, e o povo Tapeba está no meio desse imbróglio aí.
Eu, como agente de saúde, eu vejo, né, porque todas as famílias são vidas importantes, porque se não fosse importante eu não estaria aqui trabalhando com elas há 30 anos, né, mas para a sociedade, para os governantes ainda precisa melhorar muito em termos de saúde, a educação, são famílias que precisam muito ainda que sejam amparada, que são famílias que precisam, tem essa necessidade, né? Aí aqui na nossa comunidade tinha um uso muito alto de agrotóxicos, hoje está menos, né? Não quer dizer que outras pessoas ainda não usam, mas tem pessoas que usam ainda. Mas e graças a Deus nós temos um conhecimento muito bom que a gente conseguiu que isso diminuísse. Se tem esse uso muito alto de agrotóxicos, então vai impactar na saúde, né? Vai impactar na saúde daquelas pessoas que estão ali comendo aqui uma alimentação que está contaminada pelo agrotóxico, né? As sementes transgênicas também, que também a gente não sabe onde é que possa também ser um alto índice de fazer mal à saúde, né? Tudo isso, acho que a gente adquiriu conhecimento, porque sempre eu costumo dizer uma coisa: conhecimento é poder.
A gente acredita, né, que o conhecimento, o ancestral, o conhecimento passado pela minha mãe, pelo meu pai, pelos meus avós, pelos meus bisavós, tataravós, essa representatividade, né, de interligação. A gente coloca sempre a interligação porque não pode se falar de vida e não pode falar de um povo indígena sem falar com o território. Então é muito complicado a gente fazer toda essa explicação, né, para uma sociedade que não compreende essa ligação que nós temos com o território, com a biodiversidade. E muitas vezes até a universidade ela tem algumas tentativas de explicar o que nós chamamos de bem viver, né? Nós temos toda essa espiritualidade que não é palpável à mão de nós todos. Na verdade, a espiritualidade ela é complexa e para entender ela existe uma ciência. Nós temos a ciência, né? Nós sentimos a energia um dos outros, né? Nós sentimos a energia da terra, dos animais e sem todo esse ciclo do território, os povos indígenas e uma sociedade, a gente não consegue viver.
Teve muita resistência. As pessoas achavam até que a gente não era normal, né? Mas aí quando foi vendo as capacitações, e eu como trabalho diretamente com os agricultores, que isso para mim é um tipo de orgulho muito grande, porque eu sou agente de saúde, então eu trabalho diretamente com aquelas famílias. Eu sei todo mundo quem é quem, né? Mas é uma coisa boa que veio para melhorar a nossa comunidade. E tem muitas pessoas que são conscientizadas hoje, né? Tem a questão dos consórcios agroecológicos, que são uma coisa muito importante, que outras pessoas vão vendo, outras pessoas já vão fazendo. Mesmo que não participem diretamente, mas estão fazendo por fora, que a gente sabe que é uma coisa boa. Se você está deixando de usar uma coisa que lhe faz mal, que vai causar impacto na saúde, porque quando uma pessoa está doente, que ele vai para o hospital, ele está causando gasto, não está? Então seria muito mais fácil os governantes, não só o Estado, federal como municipal, eu incluo todos, seria uma coisa voltada mais para a população, né? De ter uma campanha maior, um investimento maior, porque quando você tem mais condições de trabalhar, sem usar o agrotóxico, então seria uma vida mais saudável, todo mundo ia ganhar com isso, né? As famílias, a população em si, em geral, e o meio ambiente, lógico, né?
Nós temos um processo de procura, né, dos livros, os guardiões dos saberes do nosso povo, os livros vivos, né? Os nossos tuxauas, as mulheres e os homens mais antigos, para contar a história, né? Para contar sobre os rituais, para ensinar os rituais que eles guardam, né? E assim mesmo, quando um livro desse, né, é guardado, ou quando um tronco velho desse é tombado, os mais velhos morrem ou passam para outra dimensão, né, boa parte daquela ciência ela se perde. E como a gente consegue manter tudo isso, dar continuidade a tudo isso numa situação que nós estamos vivendo hoje, sem a demarcação do nosso território, né? Com todo esse sistema capitalista que não é favorável à demarcação do território, e como a gente continua com esse processo de reprodução cultural, reprodução física do nosso povo. Esse local ele dá o nome do nosso povo, Itapeva ou Itapeava, que hoje na variação fonética é Tapeba, né? Onde se reuniram os 4 povos, os 4 clãs que formaram esse povo, Potiguara, Cariri, Tremembé e Jucá, né, com refúgio às guerras, né, e principalmente dar encontro à historiografia do próprio município de Caucaia, né? Se tem uma confusão sobre essa historiografia, mas o nosso povo ele está presente aqui, os 4 povos, e hoje nós temos um nome só, né, que é Tapeba.
Nossa comunidade é a questão da unidade de beneficiamento de higiene e processamento, né? A gente compra as sementes do próprio agricultor, das famílias dos agricultores e agricultoras. Eu, como coordenador do grupo de jovens da unidade de beneficiamento, a gente pode estar dentro das reuniões da associação, ver o que é que tem de potência dentro da própria comunidade, que tem o algodão agroecológico, enfim, tem várias outras atividades que a gente desenvolve dentro da própria nossa comunidade, que podem estar gerando renda, que é a questão também da meliponicultura, do acesso ao jovem no campo também, de a gente estar dentro também de uma escola família agrícola também, desenvolvendo uma atividade que possa melhorar a renda, melhorar a comunidade também, enfim, informações, trazer conhecimento para dentro da comunidade. Assim, a gente pretende resistir buscando cada vez mais informações, né? Conhecimento, que a gente, quando a gente tem conhecimento, a gente tem tudo, né? Praticar o que a gente já está praticando, que sempre a gente praticou agroecologia desde 2004, e até os dias atuais a gente está praticando. Continuar fazendo as informações necessárias dentro da comunidade, levar os debates dentro das reuniões da associação, levar informações para aqueles que estão desinformados e combater assim a questão do agrotóxico dentro da comunidade, combater firme e forte e mostrar que a agroecologia é importante, que defender a questão da agroecologia é importante, e dizer não aos agrotóxicos e a não os transgênicos dentro da comunidade é importante.
A gente trabalha com a questão dos artesanatos e também em questão da agricultura, né? Que a gente também tem a nossa área de plantio, onde a gente planta macaxeira, milho, batata, mandioca, feijão. Tudo isso a gente planta na nossa área de plantio, certo? Eu e o meu esposo, a gente trabalha, né, na área de plantio. Ali a gente tem o nosso espaçozinho. Aí a gente planta, certo? Quando a gente começou, o meu avô que deu uma sementezinha de feijão, de milho. Isso é a questão do plantar e replantar, porque ele plantou, colheu, guardou, para o próximo ano a gente poder plantar novamente. Aí, em questão de venenos, a gente não usa, certo? A gente não usa de maneira alguma. E também muito cuidado com a questão dos desmatamentos, em questão do fogo, né? Que a gente também não bota fogo, a gente só capina por ali, aí mistura os matos com as areias, porque já serve de adubo, né? A gente não tira os matos lá. Então, a gente tem todo o cuidado.
Então, na prática, tanto o PL 490 como esse processo que está sendo julgado no Supremo Tribunal Federal, caso a teoria do marco temporal passe, legalizaria todo o histórico de violência cometida contra os nossos povos, legalizaria o esbulho, a grilagem, a especulação imobiliária. De algum modo, é uma tese que abriria um precedente muito grande, porque todos os crimes cometidos contra os nossos povos, crime de genocídio, de etnocídio, estaria sendo enterrado com essa teoria do marco temporal. O que nós esperamos é que, de fato, o Supremo Tribunal Federal, e nós reconhecemos na Suprema Corte uma possibilidade real da manutenção dos direitos territoriais, que foi exatamente consagrado pela nossa Constituição da República. O STF, como guardião da Constituição, não pode se curvar aos interesses políticos, à pressão do setor do agronegócio e da mineração no nosso país. Nós dizemos demarcação já, marco temporal não, porque a luta pela Mãe Terra é a mãe de todas as lutas.
Voltando, eu estou sem imagem aqui na tela.
So we're returning now.
A gente é que liga a câmera, acabei de ligar aqui, Lilian. Por favor, quem está sem câmera, liga a
So
sua.
those who don't have their cameras on, I don't have the permission of turning my camera on. So Luciano, our technician, can you please turn our cameras on or allow us to turn their cameras on?
Magnólia, tenta agora.
Pronto, ok.
Conseguiu, Lilian também, por favor.
Lillian, can you turn your camera on as well?
Luciano, você resolve, por favor.
Luciano, please, can you allow us to turn our cameras on?
Pode abrir sua câmera. Desculpa, gente.
I'm sorry for technical problems.
Bom, agora que a gente já foi presenteado com esse vídeo,
Now that we were gifted by this amazing documentary film, I'm going to invite Magnolia Said, who was the screenwriter of this amazing documentary, to talk about this film. Magnolia, you have your 15 minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to be here. I would like to say to Marina and Lillian that I was very emotional while listening to you. Marina, I would like to exchange some ideas with you once this is done. Lillian, I'm going to take you to the store of the Tapebas because you are coming to Fortaleza soon. I would like to say first that this study counted on the support of Jubilee for the Americas, the leadership of the women of the community Choró and also the community of Tapeba, and the consultancy of A.S. Oliveira, the professor of ecological economy. I also studied ecological economy besides law. This work involved a study of ecological economy. And I would also like to talk about ESPLAR. ESPLAR is an organization that turned 48 years of existence this month. It is an NGO, a non-for-profit NGO, where we develop activities focused on the strengthening of family agriculture in rural quilombola and indigenous communities in Ceará, a state located in the northeast of Brazil. And the work of ESPLAR happens through some axes. The first one is the right through healthy food, and the right to drinkable water. Our work happens also through the strengthening of a quality public education focused on the reality of the country, which we called contextualized education, and the strengthening of groups of women for political incidents and for a better autonomy of women, trying to cover the holes left by the protection of the state, especially when it comes to violence against women, and agroecology to protect the environment and against the climate change. So since 1990, ESPLAR has reported to the government and the civil society this use of pesticides in the state of Ceará. And as you mentioned before, those pesticides that are forbidden in other countries because of the degree of lethality of those pesticides, and the report of transgenic food without the proper caution and without the proper supervision. From the 4,664 pesticides already released for agricultural activities, 1,560 of them were released by this current government, and from this total, 1,082 are considered extremely toxic to health, and 167 are extremely toxic to the environment. So we are drowned by poison. In the case of transgenic food, Brazil loves to be the first in everything that is bad. Brazil leads the global growth in this technology. I don't know if you know, but currently wheat, transgenic wheat is being tested, which is resistant to drought. So transgenic wheat is being tested to be used in the bread that we eat, in the cookies that we eat. So now we have to invest in community bakeries. Recently, last month, we carried out 148 tests for transgenic technologies in cotton and corn in the semi-arid regions that we work on in 12 municipalities. We are doing the work that the government should be doing, and all of these tests resulted negative in the municipalities where we work with agroecological cotton. In the community that is portrayed in the video, the Choró community, is only one of the communities where we work in this chain of agroecological cotton. And this chain has been in agroecological cotton for 30 years. They have been working with ADEG, which is an association of development and economy. In 93, the first crop of this cotton was acquired by the Greenpeace, and today, besides ADEC, this chain has two other participatory certification associations that are in the semi-arid region. So these three associations in 2022 obtained 43,700 kilos of cotton. In order for this to be able to happen, the family farmers have resisted historically to this contamination, as the film stated. Because of the constant use of the pesticides in the community surrounding Choró, and also due to the use of transgenic seeds. This is irreversible. I don't know if you know, but here in Ceará, in the Legislative Assembly, they passed a law that forbid the spraying of pesticides in the areas, but they don't supervise this. The laws exist, but they are not enforced. In the case of indigenous peoples, the resistance is even bigger, because what is at stake is their territory. As Casimiro says, is their place of life and livelihood. The government has threatened the indigenous people with the loss of their territories, with the changes in protection legislation, especially with the outlining of their lands. And ESPLAR has carried out activities that support those communities. Today, we have 14 ethnicities in the state of Ceará, assisting them in the recovery of their territories, replanting the native forests, trying to resist the activities of Bayer. Since last year, Bayer is trying to revert the prohibition of pesticides that kill the bees. Regarding the indigenous peoples, we also assist in the production of handicraft with the products from nature and the work with artisanal medicine. This work that we do with the two different audiences in different fields of knowledge, in land and also in agriculture, water, production, made us realize how important it was for the strengthening of these two collectives if we promoted these experiences related to the modes of production, the modes of income generation, education, handling of culture, and organization for political actions, besides reporting what happens in these two areas. So that's how the idea of the study and the film came up. Initially, the study was supposed to be disseminated in a popular jury. We had experience with a popular jury before. This study started from a diagnosis on the different situations that weaken the ways of life and the ways of production in these two different collectives. My impression is that this study is very important for these peoples because it allowed, in an organized fashion, the identification of the violations that the state was carrying out with these people. The indigenous practices and the family farmers' practices have positive impacts on the environment. That is why we decided to join the indigenous peoples and the farmers. Of course, there are there are differences among them, but the hurdles that they faced were very similar. The way they live with nature, the way they relate with nature, the way they appreciate nature in the indigenous tribes and the farms, the respect they have towards nature, which impresses me very much. When I observe them, the way they learn with nature, the way they seek a healthy lifestyle, and the way they oppose traditional agriculture. When I noticed that they can learn alternative ways of producing. With this film and with this study, we are reporting these crimes that have been committed against these populations that live in vulnerable situations. We are reporting this ecological and social debt that has been accumulating by all of these people, that is expressed especially in the insecure conditions that the Tapeba people live today, especially when it comes to not outlining their lands and also the entrance of criminal groups in this area. This area belongs to no one, between quotation marks, so any criminal group can invade it. So why this happens? Because this area is not protected by the only body that is supposed to protect the indigenous people, which is FUNAI. The other thing is that these debts are also expressed by the denial of their rights by public policies. These policies are extremely precarious when it comes to especially health and education. There is also an absence by the control of the federal government when it comes to the consumption of pesticides that affects the life of these populations, along with the transgenic seeds. With the study and with the documentary film, we're trying to report the lack of care and these lack of public policies, which were supposed to preserve and protect these indigenous people and the small farmers, protecting their costumes and their habits and their lifestyles. Historically, what was taken away from these groups has to be recovered. Their current and future needs have to be promoted. This goes through what Lillian was saying, a project of development based on agroecology and the use of sustainable techniques and sustainable tools to strengthen the traditional forms of preserving and caring for nature, and also to decolonize a culture of consumption that degrades nature and also that degrades people's life cycles. And I end with the question that brought us here. With an ethical and economic irrationality that dominates this country, what is a life worth? Thank you very much. Thank you, Magnolia. This notion of a debt is a very important notion because it brings very clear to us the notion of an expropriation. These people that are connected to the land had this historical process since the Portuguese invaded our lands. This is centenary. We're going to listen now to VEJA, who is waiting for us until now. So VEJA, the floor is all yours. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Bom, gente, muito obrigado. Queria novamente fazer esse agradecimento.
Thank you very much. I would like again to thank the organizers of this event. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about our struggle. And I would like to talk about the whole difficulty that we've been going through in our territory. First, I would like to say that even though our country is young, we have 522 years of colonization. We have to understand that this colonial process started back then with the Portuguese and the Europeans. The colonization is still ongoing, trying to occupy most part of the territories that are occupied by the original peoples of this country. I live in a region where this colonial process started, the northeast of Brazil, the sea coast. As it was said in the video, this process is a result of the colonial process. The municipality of Caucaia, which is where I live, where the Tapeba people lives, before it was a municipality, it was a village, and only then it was turned into a municipality. So we were talking about a country that has been through 522 years of colonization, and it's still not over because our territories have been very attacked, and our expectation is that we go through the emancipation and we can be free. But they intend to occupy the lands that are occupied by our indigenous people. Through the articulation of the indigenous people of Brazil, APIB, we have been carrying out international reports and complaints. We were in conversation with the European Parliament to discuss the need of the European countries to track their products produced by agribusiness, stating clearly that the agribusiness is marked by the genocide and the ethnocide, especially by the death of part of our territories and also the death of many communities and many indigenous people. A few weeks ago, there was a double murder acknowledged internationally. The indigenous expert Bruno Pereira and a very famous journalist, The British journalist Don Phillips were murdered in the Amazon. Right now, there is a true massacre of the indigenous people, Guarani and Kaiowá, in the state of Mato Grosso do Sul. They live in the borders of the farms of soy and corn are being murdered. It is a very harsh scenario for us. I would like Luciano to share a slide that helps demonstrating our situation. We have produced a book with the help of ESPLAR, and we also helped producing this documentary film. This is the situation of regularization of the indigenous lands in Brazil. These are official data that you can find in FUNAI, the National Foundation of Indigenous People. This foundation is completely weakened by the current government. The current president of FUNAI during 3 years has never been to an indigenous land. We have 43 outlined indigenous lands. We have 75 declared indigenous lands. This includes the Tapeba land. This process has been ongoing for almost 40 years. We have only 9 homologated indigenous lands and 441 regularized indigenous lands. And 6 of these lands are occupied by peoples that are isolated and have no contact with what we call the world of the white people. I would like to highlight here the processes that are ongoing, the processes of regularization. At a national level, we have 119 indigenous lands under process of identification. For over 15 years, they cannot advance. They don't have any legal security. And we have over 640 indigenous lands claimed. They are in line so that the government can start their regularization process. When added, it is over 50% of the lands in Brazil that are not regularized. They have no legal security. They have no acknowledgement by the Brazilian government. So the land conflict happens very strongly in these territories. At a state level, from the state that I come from, the state of Ceará, is also a very daunting scenario. We have 2 indigenous lands under process of identification, 10 indigenous lands in different stages of regularization that has some kind of legal security, and 10 claimed lands under no identification from the Brazilian government. The Tapeba people are in the state of Ceará, and it is the state that is in the latest stage. We are very late in the stage of identification and in the state of regularization. I have here a small chart for you to have an idea of the current scenario. It is a very harsh scenario for us in Ceará. We are in the struggle to change the scenario. We want the next government to strengthen the situation of the indigenous lands in Brazil. And we want the next government to put in the agenda the need to outline the indigenous lands. I can share this with you. This is the spatial location of the indigenous lands in the state of Ceará. We have 15 indigenous peoples spread throughout 20 municipalities. This is the map of the state of Ceará. We occupy the metropolitan region of Fortaleza, which is the capital, the seacoast, the west seacoast. The central, what we call the Sertão, which is the central region of Ceará. We have a legend here. I'm not going to go into detail, but it's a table with the name of the indigenous lands, the name of the municipality, and the status of each one of these indigenous lands that I just mentioned. Here, I bring you some headlines, some clippings from local newspapers that show our struggles and the scenario of indigenous rights violations, as Magnolia said, the advances of criminal gangs in our territories. For example, this gentleman that appears in the middle of the slide had his house demolished along with other 10 houses. This gentleman is the sheriff of our group. There is a conservation unit in our territory, but it was not respected at all. There are pipelines that go through our territory. There are transmission lines. It's a small territory of almost 6,000 hectares. We are the second municipality in population in the state. We have 4,000 inhabitants, but we have suffered a very big pressure from the government. This is to show how we have faced the government. Our protests, our people is very organized. We have carried out 34 protests, very meaningful protests to ensure areas of community crops, to ensure our fruit, to ensure our fruit orchards, to ensure our fishing practices, places of preservation like our rivers, our mangroves, our lagoon, which is a sacred place, our Tapeba lagoon. So these pictures here show how the Tapeba people is organized and how we are prepared for the fight. You're going to see marches in the center of the city of Caucaia. We have almost 8,000 indigenous people, so we march through the main streets of the center of the city, claiming for our rights so that we can outline our land. You will see our presence here in Brasilia, where we are right now trying to carry out an interinstitutional articulation. We block roads that go through our territory. But I'm going to change the tone here because we can not only talk about bad things. I'm going to show now our territory. You can see that our territory is very rich. There are a lot of collective crops. We have a very beautiful river in our metropolitan region of Fortaleza, the Ceará River. It is a territory that is there for us to create social movements. We have 13 indigenous schools, 5 health units. The forests are very alive. We have a lot of animals. And from these forests, we can strengthen the knowledge of our traditional medicine. We can collect seeds, timber, coconut. This is an area that guarantees this harmony with our ancestry, with our spirituality. This is where we carry out our rituals, our passage rituals, which is a type of baptism of our children. there is a sacred worship space which is very important for our people, where we carry out important moments like the Carnaúba Fest. The Carnaúba Fest is the main party, the main celebration for our people. Carnaúba is a palm tree. It is a tree that is considered sacred for our territory. So this territory is where we cherish the cooking of our people, our handicraft. We have places considered places of memory. So this territory is the open door to access policies. We only build schools and health units if we have our territory at our hands. Even though it is a disputed territory, a territory that is the center of a very strong conflict with a negligence of the public institutions, a negligence of the Brazilian government, but this motherland is a territory that we take care of until today. It's the same territory that was the territory of our ancestors. We understand that we have the mission of taking care of this territory and ensuring this territory so that the next generations have the same right of being in this territory and taking care of the same land. So through these pictures and the pictures that were shown in this the documentary film, you can understand the wealth that we have in our territory. We are clear that our role as defenders of the environment and defenders of the forest is preserving the territory so that we can guarantee the future, not only of the next generations of our people, but the next generations of our planet. So we have shown a new project of society, the society of welfare, the concept of family agriculture. These are concepts created by the academia, but we indigenous people have always lived that way. I finished now as I finished my speech in the documentary film. We fight for the territory and the Mother Earth because the Mother Earth is the mother of all of us. Thank you, Baby. Thank you for bringing such an urgent and important message for us, not only of the resistance of the indigenous people, but also the beauty of culture and the beauty of nature, of which you are guardians. We received a message here throughout your speech by Manuel Teles about the urgency of bringing this important information and data on the stealing of native lands that are being exposed here in this panel for the whole world, the importance of listening to the voices of the indigenous people of Brazil. So thank you, Manuel, for this message. Can some of you from the panel comment before we open for questions? Do you want to say something else? Magnolia, Lillian, Marina? Can we move on to the question and answer session? Now we're going to open for the audience. Sandra Nissen said, yes, you are fighting for all of us. It's good that this is a common struggle for the whole Brazilian people. This is a big debate throughout the whole country. We understand that we are in a single planet and we have the right, obligation, and duty to fight for the well-being of all. This is our struggle, and this is how we understand that we should move on. I would like to apologize to you. We are here in Brazil since Monday, and we have a meeting at the Defender's office. I would like to leave 5 minutes from now. I have to leave, actually. The case of the Tapeba people was complained in the International Court of Human Rights. All of the rights violations that we had throughout the last centuries because of this colonial project. Well, I'm going to excuse myself because in 5 minutes I'm going to need to leave. VEJA, no problem. We understand. It's very important that you are in Brasilia struggling for this. I thank you because you are able to be with us today. I know that you are at the National Congress. You are using an office of another representative. Thank you very much for being there, discussing the struggle of your people and discussing the struggle of all of us.
Boa sorte, Veide, querido.
Good luck, baby.
Boa sorte.
Good luck. We're here rooting for you and rooting for a victory against this new framework proposed by the government. I hope we have good news soon. I'm here trying to see if we have some questions. We have a question here. I'm going to direct this question to Marina. Actually, she answered a little bit about this at the end of her speech, but Marina, can you share with us some examples of types of production of these alternative fibers that are already ongoing? We have the case of cotton that we see here being carried out by ESPLAR, but do you have any other practices in Brazil? We have silk in the Silk Valley, but there is a shortage of neutral researches. We have a lot of research about the interests of silk, but certainly the production of silk in Brazil has a particular characteristic. Silk is produced as family agriculture. It is complex to describe the use of pesticides. We also have, for example, women working with carnaúba, the palm tree that VEJA talked about. It is a very important process, even though carnaúba is not in the same logics as fibers. Carnaúba is historically used for the production of baskets and accessories. But when we start looking at decoration and fashion accessories, we also have a different logics. It's a production that is suffering a lot with the climate change, especially in the Northeast and the deforestation of the Amazon. Desertification increased a lot in the Northeast. And the production, the women, because most of them are women, are struggling with drying the hay from carnaúba. Maybe Magnolia can speak about it. Brazil has this characteristic of agroecology and associated models to agroforest for the production of fibers, but also for the production of food. When we look at fibers and alternative fibers, we also have to look at the food sovereignty. Cotton is the one that stands out. Of course, we could talk about wool, but there's also a complexity because of the emission of gases and the animal rights. So I prefer looking at vegetal fibers. Of course, what highlights the most is cotton, but we have a lot of possibilities for the production of hemp. But this requires the legalization of hemp in Brazil. Hemp has a simpler production with little water and little fertilizers. It is easier for hemp to grow. We can learn with these logics of cotton, and when we propose the production of hemp, it is going to be a lot easier.
impede a legalização do cânhamo?
What prevents the legalization of hemp? What prevents the legalization of hemp in Brazil is a culture of prejudice, of course. Even though hemp has no THC, it is cannabis sativa, and of course, the interests of agribusiness. We cannot use the machine, the same machines. We need other machines to produce hemp. We have these struggles. When we talk about fibers and production, we have to talk about public policies of incentive for this sector. If we don't have the government on our side, we cannot use these new economies and put them in practice. There is a political struggle. There has to be a political struggle for us to be able to incentivize these new machines and allow the production of hemp and streamline these new productions. There's also a question from the audience before we finish our panel. I would like to ask this question to Lillian. It's a question by Sandra Nissen, and she asks, we are using a very comprehensive definition of sustainability. To what extent this is encompassed as a view of sustainability? Would you like to answer that, Lillian? Well, currently, Sandra, those who work with sustainability for a long time end up having a resistance with this word. And on the other hand, we have a lot of things to learn on what sustainability is. There's a lot of people who don't know what sustainability is. Sustainability was shown to us through advertisements of banks and mining companies. Sustainability is only associated to the environment. We still don't have a basic concept of sustainability. It is a very comprehensive concept. And at the same time, it's a very basic and simple concept, but people don't know about it. When we talk about what is sustainability in a bigger concept with a bigger dimension, it was already coined with a bigger dimension. Differently than countries that started educating their children in the beginning of the 1990s with sustainability, we were educated in sustainability through publicity. And I also think it's interesting because everything has two sides. This big publicity of the term also disseminated the term. There's a lot of people talking about this and very few people that actually understand the term sustainability and its comprehensiveness. We need to continue talking about sustainability. We cannot get sick of sustainability. And as it is disseminated, it is legitimized. When I started working with sustainability in the beginning of the 2000s, I was the eco-boring person. And today, people legitimize my narratives because somehow people internalized it and they start thinking it's legitimate being here talking about sustainability. Sustainability is a deeper topic and a more comprehensive topic because it is deeper. I agree with you, Lillian. I would add that being in the global south and living an extreme social inequality that characterizes us and brands us throughout our whole history. It's very difficult to approach sustainability as something technological or only environmental. This doesn't pertain to us. So this narrative that we bring here with the presence of VEJA and with the presence of ESPLAR represented here by Magnolia and the three of us who are researchers is a different look. That is why it's important to be here in this dialogue with people who are in a different position and that maybe look at sustainability in a different way. So I think this observation, this remark that you just made is very important because we look at sustainability from a different standpoint. And Marina brings this when she talks about modifica because she always talked about this topic. When we approach sustainability in fashion, we approach it from a different standpoint. We approach it from the standpoint of people with the purpose of reducing social inequality. This has always been our point. I always talk about the SDGs, and I think there are two that are very important, 10 and 13, which is the reduction of inequality and the reduction of greenhouse gases. We always have to look at the balance between these two SDGs. There's a point that I find very interesting when I participate in international debates, which is an example of this. There's a huge debate on plastic, saying that we cannot use recyclable forks or spoons. In the last 2 years, we have had a 250% growth on the garbage collector associations. So how can we be against the recycling of plastic forks and spoons when we know that these groups, they live off of the collection and the recycling of plastic? I am in a place that I have to support those communities because they're families. So we are in a different place. When we participate in a discussion about plastic and I see those discussions saying that we have to use wooden forks or wooden spoons. In Brazil, it is different. These are the trade-offs that are completely different than the European ones or the North American ones. So we were walking towards the end of our panel. We don't have any other questions here or any other comments on the chat. So I would like to thank you for the conversation. Thank you, Lillian, Marina, and Magnolia. It was a huge pleasure having you here with this amazing documentary film. Thank you, State of Fashion, for this amazing conference and everyone who watched us here so far. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed it. And let's continue talking.
Obrigada, Lu. Acho que a gente pode finalizar.
Thank you. Thank you, Luciano, as well, for the technical assistance.